Good evening. This is Redwood Wonk on Access Humboldt. You're either listening to us on KZZH or you're watching us on channel 12 on television, or you're watching us on the internet at the Access Humboldt channel. So tonight, as we are speaking, as we are recording this, Joe Biden is delivering a speech, the first joint Congress speech. It's historical in many respects. He's got two women sitting behind him for the first time ever. There are only going to be about 200 people in the room, because of COVID. A lot of the cabinet isn't going to be there, so they won't need a designated survivor or anything this time around. It's going to be historic in a lot of ways, but he's just passed his first 100 days. He's got with a 61% approval rating. I forget, if that was the average or if that was a particular poll. Not the highest. In fact, it's the third lowest since they started doing that, but they attribute that to partisanship, 61%, and even the lowest one I saw, 56% approval rating, is still very high. Trump's never got above 50 that I remember. Still pretty high for this particular stage of American politics. The economy is going well. It's starting to pick up. Consumer confidence has been shown to be strong at this point. It looks like unemployment is going down. It looks like we're not really facing inflation, although some people are concerned about some signs about that. Economy going good, but he doesn't want it just to be a sugar high. The president wants to move forward with some restructuring, with some additional programs. It sounds like and believes for the first time in decades, a president overtly believes in big government. Mm-hmm. What is he going to talk about, Chuck?
Well, that's a very good point. A president who believes in big government, and also that government can actually work and be efficient and deliver the services people expect from government. So I like the way you described that. I think my read on this speech that he's delivering to a joint session of Congress, that is not being called a State of the Union because it's his first, although with Biden having been in office for 100 days by now and having, been out there and working on various programs, in a way, this does feel more like a State of the Union message than just a brand new president saying hello. Right. And in fact, what he is going to outline are programs for, the American Rescue Plan, Jobs Plan, a family plan, $2 trillion in social programs, which, let's not forget, follows on the heel of large COVID relief plans and also a lot of discussion about a big infrastructure plan. So he is going bold. And I think that what we read into that, or what we could read into that, is that the Biden administration and all of the advisors around the administration have assessed the political landscape, especially in Washington, and said, look, you might as well go bold because it's unlikely you're going to get any help from the Republicans. So present what you want to do and make them take a stand on it.
In the next segment, we'll talk a little bit about discussions going with Republicans. There actually are a couple of positive things going on. We'll talk about that in the next segment. But I think you're right. He's saying go big. This is not a time for a timid presidency. He doesn't want it to be talk. He knows this is his moment. The first couple of years, he doesn't know if he'll have a congressional majority the next time around. So he's got to get some stuff through, and then it probably a lot of spending and money to be there. Then it becomes a fight later on what do you do with it, or how does it get allocated. But it does seem like he's pretty optimistic. I mean, just watching him on television, he seems pretty confident. He's not sort of falling apart like Republicans thought he would because he's so old or anything like that. I mean, he had the tripping up the stairs, and okay, that's going to be good for some Saturday Night Live moments and the rest, but it doesn't seem to have really hurt him. The same people who like him, the same people who hate him, hate him. And it's moving forward. And I think he's going to really try to emphasize and sell the message of what has happened, of how much better off we are than we were in January, and what he's done to make sure that we are that way.
Yeah, and let's also speculate about something here. And again, we're recording this basically as the speech is happening, but what we think is going to be in it from what we've seen by way of previews of it. A lot of what he's going to propose in this joint session of Congress speech will benefit a lot of the folks who have in recent elections been voting Republican. Remember that especially in 2016, a lot of working class folks voted for Trump, voted Republican, and that's been going on, for a while. And a lot of what he's going to propose will benefit those folks. So this is going to force Republicans in Congress to take a stand on that one way or the other. I think what will happen down the road is this speech will give Democrats opposing some of those Republicans in the midterms something to talk about and something to point out that the Republicans in Congress, the incumbent Republicans, voted against some of the things that would help the very people who are going to be going to the polls in the midterms. So we'll see how all this unfolds, but there's a lot of interesting politics involved in this speech that's kind of under the surface of what the contents of the speech actually are.
I agree. I think this is going to be significant. I saw that McConnell was today trying to preempt it a little bit, talking about what a bad president he's been over the past few months. No unity, pulling out of Afghanistan. He's complaining about, all the spending and pushed through without any Republican votes, as if that's the measure of its success as to whether Republicans voted for it or not, and not whether it's actually working and helping people. And the laundry list, he doesn't like H.R. 1, the voting control. So he went through the Republican laundry list of the things that they don't like to try to preempt it. And obviously, by traditions, a Republican, I don't know who's been designated to give the speech, will give the counter speech afterwards, and almost nobody watches. Tim Scott. Oh, really? Okay. Oh, yeah. He's wishing it was 2019 right now. Anyway, okay. I didn't realize that was him. That'll actually be kind of interesting because, he is one of the people who you think of as a possible presidential candidate, although he's got his replacement governor DeSantis to be countering him on that. Anyway, this is theater. It is kind of the Academy Awards of politics in a way. People show up, but again, there's only going to be 200 people there. But probably on television, people will be treated to people. There'll be gatherings elsewhere that are going to be on Zoom or whatever, and we'll be seeing what the responses are. Justice Roberts is the only representative of the Supreme Court who's going to be there, and so usually you have guests that kind of emphasize your policy thing, Joe Blow that you helped or something like that. I'm, thinking that what would be really good for him in the next time around, especially in a full hall, is to bring in immigrants who have benefited from his change of policies. Immigrants who are languishing on the border and who are now, having snowball fights with their kids in Minnesota. I think he really needs to emphasize some of those things and get some of those stories out. And, it doesn't sound like he's taking advantage of that tonight. But we'll see what he says about immigration, because that seems to be what's happening at the border, his kind of weakest point at the moment.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have it right on who's delivering the Republican response. Maybe the manager of our research department up on the fourth floor can check for us. But yeah, I agree. And, you mentioned immigration. I think going forward, no matter what's in this speech, that is going to be a go-to issue for the Republicans for the near future, and probably all the way into the midterm elections. We'll see, but you're right to point that out for sure.
All right. I mean, and maybe we'll take this into the next segment. So this segment I dedicated to discussing the way the conversations are going in Congress right now. Apparently, there's been a counter proposal of sorts from Republicans for somewhere between $500 and $600 billion in spending on infrastructure. Now, this is lower than the the stimulus bill of Obama. Back when, which has since been determined to be thoroughly inadequate to really help us pull out of the recession. And so, there's no way that the Democrats are going to agree to go that low. And it's very vague on what's proposing. But apparently, I'm forgetting her name, but she is Manchin's fellow senator in West Virginia, has been engaged in serious talks that both the administration and some of the Democrats in the Senate are saying were productive. So I don't know what that means. We don't have a lot of details, but it does sound like there is an effort being made, and maybe Manchin is brokering it, to come up with a decent infrastructure bill. And maybe that's why we're getting Senator Shelley Moore, and that's why we're getting these messages of other programs, the Family Act, that's going to be $2 trillion by itself. Maybe the Democrats just figure, okay, maybe we'll put together a meaningful infrastructure bill that is bipartisan, and then we'll go back to jamming something through with the Family Act, which it basically not only it's about $2 trillion, puts together a bunch of programs, enhances existing programs. We don't have a lot of details yet; they're starting to come out, and adds a few different kind of programs, but also in the same bill restructure some of the taxes, including shutting down some loopholes on capital gains and interest and income and the rest. And like I said, we don't have a lot of details, and the little bit I read is a little bit over my pay grade in terms of what it means. I need to learn what the terminology is. Republicans are already freaking out about especially that aspect of it, but it may be that we do actually get a bipartisan infrastructure bill out. It'll have to be a lot higher than it is, but maybe it won't be quite $2 trillion. I know the left will complain about that, but about the lack of stimulus. But if we've got other stimulus spending bills coming out, total of $4 trillion is what they're talking about, then maybe that aspect of it maybe the amount doesn't matter so much as negotiating the details of what infrastructure is going to be covered.
Yeah. I'm wondering if the further and further we get from the 2020 election, whether there will be some Republicans who will find it increasingly more difficult to just vote no against everything, including things that would benefit their own constituents. Mm-hmm. And there's no better example than infrastructure. Whether you only think about it as roads and bridges, as some Republicans do, that still is helpful to everybody, regardless of political party. And you have to believe that there are Republicans in Congress who are looking at 2022 and 2024 and even beyond and thinking, I can't just keep voting against all of this that we need in our district or our state. But I don't know. The spell of Donald Trump may still be overtaking all thought in the Republican Party. I don't know, but I have to believe that the further we get away from 2020, the more likely it is that at least a few Republicans will want infrastructure bills and some of the other things that we're talking about.
Right. I mean, it didn't back in 2010, they actually took credit for stuff that they voted against. I mean, literally, they would go back to their districts and say, see, look what federal money is coming here when they voted against it. I mean, it just was absolutely shameless. And I'm sure they'll do the same again. But maybe it'll become, I don't know whatever happened to those same people when they're trying to run for re-election. We'll talk a little bit about how the the Congress and the districts are all going to be restructured anyways soon in
Yeah.
a upcoming segment, but they have to be looking at it. I mean, I think the common claim is that the president usually loses seats in the first term, which would mean that they're going to lose both branches of Congress. Doesn't always happen though, and it's not normal times right now. And there is a lot to be said about that. So I do think that they do have to think in terms of they may have to go back to their constituents saying they actually got something done.
Yeah.
Especially if the economy is roaring, they got to go back and say I was part of that. Or was I in the way of that? That type of, because their opponents are going to be hammering on it, not just the Democrats, but people in the primaries, wherever that happens. So it's anyway, there are some that the problem they have is there's another trend going the opposite direction. Trump has pretty much reasserted control of the party, and you've got Nikki Haley, we talked about last week, backing off of her claim, wanting to run even if Trump runs, and other politicians, Mitch McConnell saying he wants peace with Trump and the rest, but and maybe they don't have to overtly break with them, but just do the things that are bipartisan in nature. If they can even have a climate of Senator Shelley Moore, being somebody saying, okay, well, we need to at least talk, and maybe we can come up with some kind of compromise here. If it gets her vote, then the whole this is just Democrats shoving it down our throats thing gets kind of lost, even if it's just for one bill. It's a big bill.
Yeah, you wonder if there is that one bill or that one issue that when a couple of Republicans decide they can just no longer keep voting no because they actually have constituents who would benefit from something. If a couple of Republicans do go ahead and say, yeah, we need this in my district or my state, whatever it happens to be, when the dam will break or whether, it will. I happen to think that at some point it will.
I do too, because we're going to get farther into the economy is probably going to be improving over the next year, probably next 2 years. So they aren't going to be able to get in with doom and gloom. It's just going to be basically the cultural politics of Trump. And how far can they get on that? I think part of the problem with the first few months is the 7 Republican moderates who voted for impeachment gave up a lot of their capital there. They can only oppose so much and expect to be able to survive a primary challenge. Murkowski's in trouble, for instance. I don't ever write her off. She's been written off before, but she is going to be facing a lot of money and a lot, and she's the first one to come up. The rest of them, really have to not be seen as being on the sides of the Democrats too much. Shelley Moore didn't vote for it. She's voted pretty much along with the right-wing crowd the whole time. But maybe that's where something can happen here. And once it starts breaking that way, then Trump is kind of defeated in a more subtle way in that bipartisanship becomes something that becomes a premium in practice as well as word.
Yeah. I think that you're spot on correct about that. In fact, it reminds me of an article I read recently about a couple of congressmen in blue or purple states who happen to be Republican, who are actually reaching out not so much to Democrats, but to independents in their districts and talking about not now, but the future. One of them is Adam Kinzinger in Illinois, and of course, no surprise there. He's been a vocal opponent of Trump for a long time, and vocal about his somewhat independent stand in Congress. And so apparently he's reaching out to a lot of independents. And let's remember that independents make up a large part of the electorate these days. So he may have a good idea there. We'll see if it works. But that's exactly his plan, is to do what's right and see if he can retain his office by talking about doing what's right. And what he means by that is what's necessary for his district.
Yeah. Well, they're calling McCarthy the speaker in waiting.
Yeah.
Of course, McCarthy is probably one of the more spineless politicians out there. So he's not. You're not going to expect much from him. Will he be able to whip all the moderates in shape that are running in? I mean, Republicans won a lot of those swing districts this time around. They got to worry about holding on to him.
I don't think I've made mistakes. I mean, every time somebody says I made a mistake, they do the polls and my numbers go up. So I guess I haven't made any mistakes.
We showed up and we demonstrated that we would not have our voices silenced by a Republican Party that across the country had a singular intention on suppressing the right to vote.
Some Democratic senators seem to imagine they could just break the rules on a razor-thin majority. Nothing would stand between them and their entire agenda, a new era of fast-track policymaking.
The Republican Party moved very far away from reality.
All right. Rudy can't fail. Rudy was Giuliani was raided today. I mean, how the mighty have fallen. Remember when this guy was the mayor of the United States?
Yeah.
It being praised. Yeah, people around. And I think, Trump has just been his demise in history. Now, granted, boy, he got, eaten alive by Borat and a few other people as well. But it's but he's got some problems that date back even before his shenanigans with the election, obviously going back to his two buddies, one of who's completely turned on him from the Ukraine, and the dealings that possibly could tie. Anyway, I mean, there's a lot to discuss, and more will come out. But an amazing thing happened today. There was actually a raid on his apartment, going after primarily his devices, his electronic devices, particularly the anything with information on it. You had some ideas about what they were after, but I'm really curious. Would he be stupid enough to have incriminating evidence digitally this late that could make this raid be productive?
Yeah, that's the real question, huh? Yeah, what I read earlier today was that they were in his apartment for about 45 minutes. He was cooperative and turned over a phone, an iPad, and a laptop. Now, who knows what's on those? Who knows that if that's all he had, that is all he gave to them. We know that. There was an interesting assessment of this a couple of hours after the raid that I was reading, and one person suggested that, a lot of the stuff that's on a device like that is stored in the cloud, or maybe information from an email that was sent to somebody else that could be retrieved from the recipient of some sort of message or email or text, whatever it happens to be.
Good point.
It could be, this person was speculating that the investigators already had the information, but wanted those devices just in case there was something that they didn't know about. There was also speculation that the reason for the raid today might have been information that people like Michael Cohen may still be turning over to investigators. And let's recall that Cohen, who's the former personal attorney for Trump, or attorney for the Trump organization, actually, has been cooperating even after he's been released from prison. I think he's been interviewed 8 or 9 times, that only the times that we know about since getting out of prison. So who knows what direction he's been pointing investigators in. But I have a feeling that Rudy is in some peril, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. Although I was listening to somebody on NPR on the way home talking about how the case would be very difficult against him. But it doesn't matter. He doesn't want to have charges filed against him. That would be, it's hard for me to see how his career survives. If Trump doesn't survive, he's history. There's nobody who's going to want to have anything to do with him. I mean, I can't figure out anybody else who's like more reviled in politics right now than him, and I don't, there's no Republicans, there were no certainly nobody in office coming out today saying this was an outrage. I haven't seen anything. Even Trump's been quiet. Of course, he doesn't tweet anymore. But about well, this is another FISA violation of rights. And who knows? It might have been. We don't know. But it is interesting to know what the timing is. There was somebody again saying that Ken Rosen had opted not to do it before. What's changed since then? Is it just that there's a new administration, or has there been some new development? I don't know, but caution. This is not a guarantee that he will be convicted or even charged. They could be going after other people with him. They could be trying to get him to be turn evidence. And on top of it, he's facing a huge lawsuit right now, for a civil lawsuit. And definitely, he's got to worry about that, and worry about that stuff that may come out may hurt him on that, especially if it ends up in the public domain.
Well, and certainly some of the information that investigators may have collected, Rudy will say, is protected by attorney-client privilege. Now, that may be his only hope. Certainly not all of the information that they gather will be protected, but that's going to be the tack he takes, or at least one of them.
I agree. He is a lawyer, and his obviously he wanted to cooperate. He did not want to be perceived as being non-cooperative, because if he cooperates, it creates the image like there's not really much to worry about here. I mean, he is, thinking about the jury pool. He knows, he knows about this, and a lot of these cases, the way they've been turning around, with everything from the Chauvin case to all of the court cases that went down. Of course, they were all crazy, but with Trump, the conservative movement has not had a lot of court successes lately, other than a few things thrown to them from the Supreme Court. And because we'll see what this comes. I mean, we're guessing as to what it's about. We know generally what it's about, but why this raid? Why now? Is going to be a big question that everybody's asking, and everybody's just kind of standing back and waiting. Nobody coming to his defense. I mean, I didn't see anybody coming to his defense. Not one person. Not even Trump. I
agree. Actually, I hadn't thought of that, but just thinking back over the day today, you're right. Not one person coming to Rudy's defense. You're right, and maybe that's telling. I don't know. I have to think that maybe they have information or reason to believe that there's information on some of those devices regarding Ukraine. I don't know. Maybe regarding the insurrection in January. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, it's all guesswork right now. Who knows exactly? I mean, there's so many things swirling around Rudy and the whole Trump universe right now. It could be any one of a number of things.
It is, and like I said, it's not something that all of a sudden all the Republicans are latching themselves to Trump. Over the past couple of weeks, hoping that, I mean, it's problematic for him, because there was actually a very interesting interview on CNN's Don Lemon show last night of a cop saying, that he felt like he's being gaslighted by the Republicans, saying there's no big deal. He was a cop who had been pounded on, suffered a heart attack as a result, survived it. And I recommend people go to YouTube, look up Don Lemon officer, with June 2nd. I believe the guy's name is Maccone, Maccone. But it's really, telling that here's a guy saying, no, this was a major deal. This was, we were beaten, and we were attacked. This was not even a riot, a normal riot. This was something much worse. And so I think that you're going to have this pushback on that right now, as all of a sudden Rudy is in trouble, and I don't think he's going to have any defenders. I think Rudy is, is probably sunk without it. Now, the question is whether or not they've got a case to pursue beyond a reasonable doubt against him for whatever. And I don't know, but maybe it's to corroborate with other things. I don't know. We're speculating. We will report further on this in the future.
Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy.
We are going to raise issues that, historically have not been raised.
What about the nuclear option, doing away with the filibuster? I can tell you that would be the end of the Senate as it was originally devised.
All of this is possible for America. Who was standing in the way? Mitch McConnell.
Where an insurrection that sought to overturn an election, when that failed, the action moved into state capitals.
All right. Moving on to the census, the numbers are in. We know which states have increased in population, which states have not necessarily, sometimes decreased in population, but decreased in growth rates relative to other states. For the first time in decades, California has actually lost a seat. Texas, which had been expected to gain 3 seats, I think gained 2 seats. I think that was the most. Most of the seats being gained are in the South at the expense of the Rust Belt. But also Colorado picked up a electoral college vote, and that also means a congressional district, and Oregon picked up one. So it's mostly going towards the South. I think conventional wisdom says that this puts Democrats at a disadvantage. I'm not necessarily sure that that's what's going to happen. Now, definitely going to the states that gerrymander ridiculously are, they will find a way to make sure that they that the ruling party there makes use of that extra vote to their favor, if it's even possible, because what's happened is a lot of people have moved to the South. We've been talking about Georgia and the Atlanta metropolitan district. I don't think they picked up any, but and I think Alabama almost lost one, but other states did pick them up. So we'll see how this benefits. But I doubt that Oregon is going to have another Republican, because I don't think the growth happened in the rural areas there. I think it probably happened in the Portland metropolitan area. We'll see. It's a popular place to move. California, I'm not sure where we lost the population, but we can't gerrymander here. We've got a system that requires neutral reapportionment. Chuck, what do you think?
Well, I agree with you. I thought I might be the only one who didn't see this as the end of the political world for Democrats. I'm glad you don't see it as much of a freak out, and I don't either. Here's what I mean. You're right. California is going to lose a seat. What I've been reading is it's likely to be somewhere in the greater Los Angeles area, outside the city, but we'll see. But here's what I'm talking about. California loses 1, Illinois loses 1, so does Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, West Virginia. Texas gets 2, Colorado gets 1, Oregon 1, North Carolina, Florida, and Montana. So here's how I'm looking at it. I think Colorado and Oregon, right, gaining 1 each, will offset the 2 Texas gains that will be gerrymandered. So Colorado and Oregon offset Texas. It's possible, depending upon where the district is, it's possible that North Carolina could offset the gain in Florida. And we don't know what's going to happen with Montana. It's possible Montana could offset another one, maybe a loss in Illinois or Pennsylvania. So if all of that happens and Democrats hold the incumbent seats that they already have, I think you can make a case that the Democrats might only lose 3 overall. Now that's not great. I mean, losing 3 is not good in close political times, but it's not the disaster that sometimes happens in the midterms. So we'll see how that goes, but I'm not as freaked out about it as some people are.
Okay, good. You didn't ruin my prediction because I've got a prediction about this at the end of the show.
About it too. We have similar predictions. We'll see.
But I agree. It wasn't as big as we thought. I mean, California is losing people, but I think we're still increasing in population. We're losing people. But again, just because a red state picks up a state or a blue state loses a state doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be one more Democrat or one less or that, because even when they got a gerrymander, I mean, it's getting hard. It gets hard to gerrymander sometimes. Like in Alabama, the way they've gerrymandered, I think I've talked about this on the show before, and they're not going to lose one, but they've got one district that is blue, and they've basically managed to create like an octopus that encompasses both Montgomery and what's the other city down there? No, that's Selma, right? But so you've got one that basically grabs about half of the black vote and puts it in there, so that you got this ridiculous thing of, even though Democrats get anywhere from 35 to 40% of the vote in any given election, that and that's not even telling the whole story, which I'll explain in a minute. They only get 14. The Democrats only win 14% of the districts. One out of the 7, and it's aggravated by the fact that 2 or 3 of the congressional districts in Alabama had no Democratic opponent. They just didn't even bother.
Right.
Right. So how do they cast their votes? We'll never know. You look in Texas is ridiculous. Ohio's ridiculous. We have Jim Jordan because of the famous Duck District, right?
Yeah. Right.
Well, they've lost one now. It's going to be interesting to see what they do about that and how their place going. I think the only state where Democrats gerrymander is Maryland. Yeah. I don't think the Democrats gerrymander anywhere else. They can't in California. Illinois, the Democrats decided not to do that as a matter of some principle, and the rest. But the whole South is gerrymandered in both state and representative. We're going. This will be part of the voting rights bill that would basically look at gerrymandering and seeing that if it's right now. The way the Supreme Court has ruled, you can gerrymander as long as it's politically motivated rather than racially motivated, even though it just happens to be that in the South, the only way you can politically gerrymander to Republican favor is basically to negate the effect of black votes. I mean, that's just how they do it. But again, we'll see. But it doesn't necessarily mean, it means more funding for a given state. It's got some good things like that. It means, and it means that if you're a gerrymandering state, you have more to work with. But it's not. I was expecting it to be worse. I thought California might lose 2. I thought Texas might gain 3. But there's another thing we have to consider here. Okay, is this going to make it? Sure, would have made it a little closer this time around in the presidential election. But Texas, as we've been discussing, is not a certain state.
There's
no guarantee that the Republican will win it in 2024. In fact, some people are predicting that the Republican might not win it. So those extra 2 electoral college votes are going to possibly hurt them, as well as other places. So Florida's not a guarantee.
Right. Depends on where the district is. Yeah, there was something interesting. Maybe you saw this. We haven't talked about this yet, but maybe you saw this. There was an article that was released right after a lot of these census numbers were released with regard to congressional districts that pointed out that even though we don't have all of the census figures yet, some of the preliminary numbers that have been released indicate that some of the movement around the country that resulted in these the redistricting that we're going to be looking at after this census might be upwards of 70% of that movement were non-white, young people, mostly who vote Democrat. Maybe they're not registered Democrats. They could be independents or, no preference, depending upon what state you're in. It's called something different. But these are not necessarily Republican voters who are moving around the country. So you're right. We don't know how this is going to impact the congressional districts. And especially in Texas, the article I was reading was pointing out that a lot of the movement to Texas is not to rural communities, it's to suburban communities around Houston and Dallas and San Antonio and Austin. And those are no longer guaranteed Republican strongholds. So I'm again, I'm not as concerned about this as I thought I would be, given where the gains and losses are and who it is who seems to be moving around.
Yeah, and it gets harder to gerrymander when they're concentrated around the cities.
Yep.
They can't make it look that ridiculous where they're just sending tentacles in and splitting up a whole community. There will be protests if they do that, right? So it's just and Texas is one of those states with a history of discrimination, again, I think another state that picked up was in North Carolina.
Yeah, North Carolina picked up
North Carolina. That's another one that kid was like 1% difference. That could very well go blue on a permanent basis. And again, harder to gerrymander if they're clustered around a city. But even the rural areas are getting tough because although Trump did pick up on Latino votes pretty much everywhere, it wasn't by much. It's still a solid majority of Latinos that are going to vote Democrat. Even if they're socially conservative, they will vote Democrat because the Republican Party isn't even budging on issues of racism. So anyway, we'll see. In a lot of these states, it's going to be challenged in general. I will actually make a prediction about this, about a rural state at the end of the show, but we need to move on to our next segment. Okay, a lot of news in the California recall. It does appear that the recall effort has enough signatures. The judge, the attempts to get signatures to recall Governor Gavin Newsom had failed in the past, but because of the pandemic, a judge gave them an extra 6 months, made it almost impossible for them to miss. So it does appear that they have the right signatures. We'll get confirmation of that shortly, and an election in the fall. We already have some Republicans stepping up, including Caitlyn Jenner, which is sort of reviving the whole circus theme. We had a bunch of celebrities last time. A celebrity won, a celebrity who's too moderate to win any Republican primary to be the opponent in. So this was how they were able to sneak him in. But I've predicted that this is not going to pass. That it's not that Gavin Newsom will not be removed from office. So we won't even get to the second half. The way it works is first you have to vote as to whether or not the current governor is recalled, and then only then are the votes. Well, they'll count the votes, but will it matter as to who wins? There's probably going to be a slew of people. It can be a plurality. You don't have to have a majority to win, but you just have to be the biggest vote getter. I haven't really seen any Democrats step forward to be the one to receive the votes. Last time, a lot of Democrats were kind of stupid, and including Feinstein saying, "I'm not going to endorse a Democrat. I don't support the recall." It's like, everybody knows that you got to have a backup plan for that, and so Bustamante didn't get a lot of support from Democrats, and so he didn't get a lot of it undermined his campaign. So. Will that happen this time around? Will there be a clear Democrat who is running against the recall and still saying, don't vote for the recall, but if a recall passes, vote for me just in case, that type of a thing? Like I said, I think it's going back to circus. This is not the state it was 20 years ago, whenever it was, 2003, when this happened. It is a much more blue state than it was. It continues to get more blue. The politics of it are that everybody's going to know that there's a 50-50 razor edge for the Democrats, and that there's always a possibility that Feinstein will not make it through the term, which would mean that if a Republican was governor, a Republican would select the replacement and put a Republican in the Senate. Democrats are aware of this. There just aren't enough Republicans to make a huge difference. I don't think many Democrats will be voting for it. The economy is expected to be good. I don't think people are going to be remembering Gavin Newsom's dinner gaffe.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of it is going to have to do with the fact that by the time all of this comes to a real question on a ballot, we're likely to be pretty much beyond the pandemic, and the economy will be back. And because of pent-up demand, the economy should be very good by then. Even as you mentioned earlier in the show, even signs that may be already happening. And I think it is important to point out that California is much different now than it was in the early 2000s. And I think Gavin Newsom, even with some of the gaffes, is in a much stronger position than Gray Davis was. Don't you think so?
Much stronger.
Yeah.
Gray Davis had nobody liking him. I mean, the Democrats voted for him just because they had to, but the only people who were really backing him were actually, ironically, cop and prison guard unions, because he was holding a standard against criminal justice reform that was as strong as any of the Republicans before him, and so there was nobody who really liked him. There are a lot of people who like Newsom, and Newsom has more energy than Davis did. He's an excellent campaigner. He'll be out there doing exactly what he needs to do. And quite frankly, he pulled it together, even though it was a slow start. He pulled together, my turn. That's how I got vaccinated. I had my second shot today. It was, based on something that he organized in conjunction with what was happening federally. He's the reason we're probably really close to the threshold of having everybody vaccinated who wants to be vaccinated, and we got to start working on the holdouts. And he's done a good job with it. And the staged reopening plannings has made a lot of people happy. It's even made even our own local Rex Bone said was complimentary towards his policies and the rest. So that's going to make him really hard to defeat. He's not Gray Davis. This isn't the same California, and the political situation is so different. I think it's going to go down in flames. I think it'll be, I think they'll be lucky to get more than 40% of the vote.
I agree. I think it might be 30 to 35, maybe. I hope we're right about this. The other thing is, I'm hoping that this is not a preview of what our politics is going to be like over the next however long, 5, 10, 15 years, who knows, where every time somebody is upset, given the 50-50 nature of society, or whatever it is, 60-40 nature of society, that we have to deal with recall movements every 2 to 4 years, maybe. I hope that that's not where we're going. That's really no way to run a society.
Well, I don't think it's going to go that way because, again, this was the pandemic that made this happen. There's always recall petitions going on. And no matter who's in office, there's always some group that wants to get recall petitions, and they usually don't get the signatures. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to get the number of signatures you need. As somebody who's raised signatures for a ballot initiative, it is hard. It is a hard thing to do. And you got to make sure you don't have false people in there, or people who do it twice, or you can just completely decimate, your numbers. It is hard. And it was just made quite a bit easier this time around. So I think it's a fluke. I don't think it's going to happen much. There will probably be another attempt afterwards, but it won't get anywhere because they won't get the signatures.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just concerned about the contentious nature of society, and politics has become such an identity sport that it can, these kinds of things in the moment we're in right now concern me about the direction we may or may not be going in. We'll see.
We will see. I mean, I really actually believe that it's too easy to do a recall in California. I think you should have at least 55% of the vote to recall somebody. It should be just absolute, which there was more than that for Gray Davis. I also think we should have 55% requirement for constitutional amendment. But anyway, we definitely do need to to look at how that is, what our discussion is like, and we are going to, on a future show, have an interesting discussion about the climate of discourse. I'm not sure exactly when yet, but probably sometime in May. And yeah, we do need to improve on that. That's why I'm kind of happy about the senator I've never heard of really until now in West Virginia, and making that effort, because we have been, ever since pretty much Obama got elected, it's just been primal. Again, I would say it goes back to the campaign, the Bush Dukakis campaign, when the Bush tactics were just over the top, and then hate radio coming up, rising in the 90s, and then the internet, Fox News, everything. That's on that side. Maybe on our side, we've talked about some things that maybe we could do to improve our discussion from the progressives, and we will have that discussion. But
maybe what's going on in West Virginia is the first sign that maybe some Republicans are thinking that they've gotten all they can out of just pushing anger and hate.
Time for predictions. What do you got, Chuck?
I have two. One, the census results that we've been talking about makes holding the United States Senate, the Senate, I think, critical for Democrats. And here's what I mean. I think that if the losses in the House mean that the Democrats may lose control of the House, if Kevin McCarthy becomes Speaker, job one is going to be, there's going to be pressure for the Republicans to move instantly to impeach Biden because they see him as illegitimate, which makes holding the United States Senate critical for the Democrats, of course. It's also going to, and this could be even happening more, much more closer in time to us right now. I think what is happening with the loss of seats in the House might increase the desire for D.C. statehood and might make Democrats push for that more vigorously than they have. So that's one thing. Look for more about D.C. statehood given this. Also, the other thing, there could be gasoline shortages this summer. The reason for that isn't a shortage of gasoline, it's a shortage of tanker truck drivers who were put out of jobs during the pandemic and have gone on to other things. And so now there aren't enough tanker truck drivers in training in the pipeline to take over. So as people are getting out of quarantine and getting vaccinated and all that, and they start moving around more, there may be gasoline shortages all over the country, not just here, but all over the country over the summer. We'll see.
Well, that's good news for the Teamsters negotiating stuff. All right, my prediction: one of the states that is going to gain a congressional seat is Montana, and I don't think there's any way they can draw Montana to avoid a strong likelihood of a Democrat winning one of those positions. It's really going to be hard to gerrymander it, and if they try too hard, there's only two of them, right? If they try too hard, they take the risk of losing both. Remember, Democrats have won statewide elections. There's a senator there who has done it. So I am predicting. I'm not saying no way. It's Montana, and there could still be two Republicans there, but I think very likely that a Democrat is going to be. That's my prediction, is that there will be a Democrat the next time around, because I read an article about it, and then I went and looked at the population distributions and where people are voting. Mm-hmm. I just don't see how they draw it up so that two Republicans can win, or be guaranteed of a win. So that's one. The other isn't a prediction. I want to make a strong recommendation. There's a series on PBS called Philly DA. It's about Larry Krasner, a reform district attorney running in 2017, won an election, came in against the death penalty, against money bail, and a lot of other items. It's done. He basically let this documentary team follow him around with a camera for the last few years. He's up for re-election coming up in November. It is an amazing story. This guy got in, and at least so far, and I'm only 3 episodes in. Like I said, you can catch up at the PBS site. I strongly recommend it. I mean, I just don't even. It's drama. I mean, it's really drama, especially when he's put on the spot when there's a lot of pressure to push the death penalty on in a cop killing case that would just really grip the city. Anyway, Philly DA. Go to the PBS site and then start watching every Tuesday night. All right. Well, thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Matt. And that'll take us. We'll be back next week, and at some point in May, we hope to have a special guest to discuss politics. But until next time, keep thinking.